I love the subtle hues that you get in mist. One always tends to think of it as being white, but in point of fact, when the film comes back, there seems to be shades of pink or shades of gold in it that you often don't see with the naked eye. And here comes the sun. Here it comes. First little, it now becomes just like a pinprick of light in the picture that sort of shifts the whole emphasis, and fortunately, I anticipated where it was coming. It's exactly at the right spot. I've been here, gosh, I don't know how many mornings over the years. And some mornings there's a lot of color. Some mornings it's just kind of silvery and a pale gold.
Growing up in New Brunswick, I was just Freeman Patterson, a farm kid. I never really expected to become a well-known photographer around the world, for heaven's sake.
Shamper's Bluff is sort of like a hand that is surrounded by water, tributaries and so on of the lower St. John River. And I owned a bit of the tip of Shamper's Bluff, and I owned a big band across the middle.
There's a whole wonderful range of habitats, from this sort of beach area and swamps and marshes to upland bogs and cliff faces, forests and fields. And I just love the place, and I love what grows here. It's my property in the sense that I live here for the rest of my life. It's not my property in that I've donated it to the Nature Conservancy of Canada. So I'm now a tenant rather than an owner.
You know, when I built this place, I just didn't have any money. I had to scrounge everywhere I could get anything. And these stairs actually are made out of a log that just came off the property here. And there was a church being torn down not too far away, and got the altar rail out of that as a railing for this crosswalk. This is made out of another log. The chain there that you saw was comes from an old covered bridge, one of New Brunswick's old covered bridges. I don't like walls. I think that people should build places to suit them and their own working. And in the wintertime particularly, I love sitting over at my desk there with the light reflecting off the snow. It really lights up this whole place, and it bounces off the ceiling. And winter confines me, so I like to be in a space that's open and gives me a sense of freedom. I've always worked for myself, so I don't have a security hang-up. A lot of people feel that anyone who produces books, authors, are very wealthy, but in this country particularly, it's not a big moneymaker. I've done quite well with mine. This one, Garden of the Gods, which someone's been looking at, and Portraits of Earth. I did both the writing and the photography for that, those two, and then I did In a Canadian Garden with Nikki Eaton and Hilary Weston, and The Last Wilderness with a whole bunch of people. Oh, those are my three instructional books here, and they've done very well. Besides having photographs and books, they can come up in magazines. I was shooting in Britain a while ago, turned a lot of pictures into the agency. Not too long after that, I opened up a copy of En Route magazine, and lo and behold, there's a double-page spread of a picture I'd taken in Britain, but it had an Audi car dropped into it. There are three photographs that kind of run neck and neck for being the most profitable in a financial sense for me. One is a picture of a single wave, and that was made in Africa, the Indian Ocean, and that has sold as a poster at least 40 or 50,000 copies. Another one's a shot of lightning, which has appeared in everything from magazines to brochures to big billboard displays. And the third one is a shot of Grotto Mountain emerging out of the mist. And so it allows a client, for example, to drop in copy text there. Each of those photographs over the years has probably sold $50,000 worth. At least one photograph of mine has been used for a Canadian postage stamp, and in fact that particular image was of a tree in winter, and as I sit here now and look out the window, I can actually see the tree. So it's another example of photographing things that are right near home. In a sense, it's just pure chance that pictures of the gardens that I have commercial sales possibilities. I didn't count on that at all when I was planting the garden. It's a nice bonus. The gardens, the flowers are for sheer pleasure. I make pictures that have some demand for editorial use, perhaps an article on gardens, or even a bank brochure wanting to show you a nice, healthy looking garden, a nice, healthy bank account kind of thing. I don't know if there's any connection, but they seem to go for this kind of thing. Lupins are a plant that was introduced but have become naturalized and in the Maritimes are now regarded as wildflowers. And you can see the incredible variety of color. You look at blue, people say, oh, there's a lot of blues. Well, here's a rich glowing purple. Here's a blue with what we call a white bee. Here's a purple with a bit of yellow in it. And then you get into combinations of pink. I love to put on close-up lenses and put a whole bunch of white lupins or whatever color right in front and throw them out of focus so they're a blur of color while I'm focused on, say, another one away off in the distance somewhere. Lots of the stuff that I made my living with was just shot around the grounds or just in the woods and all right around my home, and a great deal of it still is. This tree here I photographed with ice crystals and after a sleet storm. It's really beautiful. Underneath it, there's some alder bushes growing. Everybody hates them, but they add a lot of nitrogen to the soil. And there are asters and hay-scented ferns and dewberries and primrose and dogwoods on that side. And over here, there's a devil's paintbrush and daisies at different times. Oh gosh, here's an orchid. I think it's probably the white fringed or the purple. It's just always like this. There's just a constant sort of tapestry of plants, and they're always changing, cinquefoil. And this cedar grove is where I go to escape the world. I bring a cup of tea and I just disappear into the darkness, and nobody knows where I am. I bought the bike primarily for my own escape valve. And for me, when the phone gets too busy and everything else gets too busy, I really like to hop on the bike and just take off up the St. John River. This white house coming up on the left used to be a one-room school. It's where I started school. There were only 4 kids at the time, and 2 of us were in grade 1. And the big yellow house coming up ahead here in a minute, that's where I grew up. My sister and her husband still live there. I'm going to slow down the bike just a little so you can get a better look at it.
This is the house that we're sitting in right now. It's the old family homestead. My dad farmed the farm, so Freeman and I grew up in this house. He's 4 years older than I.
When I was young, more or less alone as a child on the farm, I had a good deal of time in the woods and driving the dairy herd out to pasture in the morning and bringing it back at night. And when one is alone, one listens to the sound of leaves and one listens to the brook. And because you're not distracted by a human playmate, you notice all of these other things. I think that's where it began for me.
This is a picture taken out here in front of the house. This was 1943. It's my father and my mother, Freeman, and myself, and a little sister, Judy, that we had, who died not long after that.
I think my sense of order and discipline really came from my childhood. It was forced upon me from my father's side of the family. He was a real slave driver when it came to work around the the farm and so on. For me, school was an absolute release from this routine that went on and on and on.
We belong to the 4-H calf club, and Freeman is showing this beautiful Holstein cow here, and I think he came second place. I think the cow came second in the show.
Once I made a decision not to stay on the farm, but to go on to university, and I knew even when I went that I would not be coming back. For me, university was not only a chance to get an education, it was the perfect escape.
He started taking quite a number of photographs, and here's one of them, showing the spring breakup of the ice in the St. John River. In fact, he's got some marvelous pictures of icebergs in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So perhaps this, you could say, is a forerunner. This is my daughter, Laura, and Laura has a little Instamatic camera, and she's wanting Freeman to teach her how to use it.
He really teaches you how to look and how to see. Just to look at things, don't just walk by like for example, this hedge. So easy to say hedge and just go cruising on by. But when I look at it, I don't see hedge. And I'm sure this comes from Freeman. I see all these little drops, and there are patterns and lines, and there are browns mixed through it, and the greens are different shades, and the leaves, you know, cross each other in a different way. Most people wouldn't stop to think or look at it. I mean, he has photographs of leaves, and it's leaves all over the... There's nothing that distracts from it. Or you'll have alder bushes or something. You just see the way they cross and the way the light hits them. And one of the things that I love about Freeman is just, it's this crazy streak. Crazy, and he'd probably do anything. One time I had a bunch of friends, and Freeman comes over in his underwear, and, oh, hello, and introduces himself, and I was kind of, I didn't know what to think. I mean, it didn't bother me. I was just wondering what my friends were thinking. Like, here's my wacky uncle introducing himself in his underwear. Anyway, and they were all so impressed that he didn't give a damn.
How long do I have to put this in?
What is it, just one?
Yeah.
Why don't you put both of them in?
Is this yours?
Is that a whole new cup?
Mine? Yeah.
Put in for 99 seconds.
Oh, he's a perfectionist because I'm making tea and he tells me to put it in for 99 seconds. I round everything off, and he would have some little number, or, I mean, it's part of a family trait. I didn't inherit it as much as some other members did, but yeah, he's a perfectionist. And the way he works, too. When he gets working on a project or a book or something, it's 150%, and sometimes you just don't see him for, he'll put a week and a half in, you won't hear from him. He just disappears, and it's constant working, and he's a real driver. Helen is Freeman's great aunt. They're both they have the same character in some ways. They both like their privacy and to be alone, and her house is in the back, and so she does the gardens and looks after the dog and holds fort, I guess, in the summer.
Fall right on top.
That's right. That's always what happens. This one, after the helicopter went over, it was all bent over.
You should have seen that one when the helicopter was going over.
Okay.
Peterson, look at the rose petal. It was just like a wind going
Well,
up.
I could see them just going like this.
I think Freeman is somewhat of a loner, and while we do get along, we both respect each other's privacy and don't take advantage, because we live in each other's backyards, that we don't take advantage of that.
Freeman, would you come here a minute and see whether these should be taken out or not?
Okay.
This year?
This one will. See, look, there's the buds coming on it already.
Oh, yeah.
See, it's the new growth again.
Right.
And that one was a sucker from a bush over there. It probably won't
Well,
bloom.
that won't bloom this year.
Oh, I bet you it will. It'll probably bloom about September or October.
He probably is eccentric. He's extremely neat about his house and you know, keeping things in its place. And, you know, everything has to be where it's supposed to be.
I don't know how things get on the floor so easily. I guess it's from leaving the doors open and having the wind blowing through, but sometimes when I have photographers around the place, what happens is they pick things up, stand them in a new place to photograph, and then leave them where they photographed them.
The other aspect of my photography is that I do a lot of teaching of photography, and I do approximately 5 week-long workshops every year near my home in New Brunswick, 3 every year in Africa, right on the border of Namibia and South Africa, and then a lot of one-day seminars around North America. There's above Shamper's Bluff.
Okay, this afternoon, what I want to talk about is the 4th visual building block, perspective. And perspective, from a photographic standpoint or from the standpoint of any two-dimensional visual medium, literally means the illusion of distance or depth on that two-dimensional surface, on that flat surface. In this first photograph, which I made from a tower at the edge of a bog, you can see that there's a boardwalk that leads across the picture space. Now, take a look at this image. This is the same boardwalk. First of all, I came down from the tower. I got right down on the boardwalk, down on my knees, in close. And at the same time, I switched whatever lens I had on the camera, I think it was about a 50mm lens, to a wider angle lens, like a 28mm. Or if I had a 28mm lens on, I switched to a 24. In other words, a wider angle or shorter focal length. This is down in Chile, actually, in a very remote area of southern Chile. And I was standing with a 70 to 210mm zoom lens on my camera, probably at about 150mm. In the foreground, over by the lake, you can see a mass of white stones or rocks. And what I did for the next picture was to leave where I was standing, walk about, 20 meters forward, put on a 24mm lens, and drop to my knees. I also switched into the vertical position. One of the problems we all have, if I may use another word for perspective, is in switching our mental perspective and thinking sideways, as it were. Looking at something like say a spider's web. I got trapped for years into looking at spider's webs head on until one day I got bored with it. And instead of looking at spider's webs like this, I said, well, why don't I shoot across a spider's web? And that opened up a whole different world for me.
Ooh, the colors are phenomenal. Just absolutely phenomenal. It's just like shafts of lights. There's deep reds, greens, yellows, oranges. Everything is here in this web. Ooh. That's nice.
I'm a person who loves order, and this is true of a lot of my photographs. There's a sort of a fundamental structure or order to things. But once that's established, then you can play all over the place. And I find that that was true in my photographs before I allowed it to become true in my life. So in that sense, my life is catching up with my photographs. And, you know, I think that people who take any sort of art form really, really seriously tend to do that. What their performances are almost in advance of themselves. They're acting it out before they can really say, this is me.
Here, I'm throwing everything out of focus. Sort of there's a kind of a webby haze over everything, and then these shafts of prismatic light coming down. Anyone want to take a peek?
Oh my! Oh, you said something wrong.
No, I didn't do your right thing.
I would love to have just a dewdrop on the end of the fern, on the end of the frond there. And if Freeman were around, that dewdrop would be there. His camera and equipment and that are just so much part of him that it's just an instinctive thing for him to be able to do that and to grasp the moment, where the rest of us will struggle for it.
And this will also have the effect of moving this block.
And photography with him is it's not even a business at this point. I think it's just part of his life. I think he works with the camera every day, practically. He goes out for a walk with Tosca in the woods, and he takes the camera, and there's always something that you'll see there.
What I'm seeing here now are sort of great Elizabethan headgear with sort of green heron feathers and things like that. They're quite beautiful. One of the things that I love doing is really getting down and exploring ferns with a very, very shallow depth of field, a wide open lens. And I'm never afraid to let the fronds, or if it's grasses or whatever, brush right up against the front of my lens. They just create a kind of haze. But I really like this, wow. Sometimes I set myself an exercise like saying, I will not leave this place, not leave this little tiny area until I've made 36 different compositions. Everyone has to be different. That really forces me to see. It's a wonderful exercise. The best teacher that you can possibly have is just the act of doing something.
I've done shooting of bikers, the local Harley Owners Group chapter that I belong to myself. These are friends of mine, and I photograph them, and I'd really like to do a book on bikers. It'd be really great to get on a Harley and just ride around North America and photograph the whole biker culture and subcultures, and photograph in bars, photograph at rallies.
Okay, come here. Come here. You got to get this. This is a man with no hair.
Don't talk to the camera.
This is a man with no hair. This is a man with no hair, Freeman. There you go. He's got hair. This is our mascot.
Quite a lot of my traveling is for the purpose of photography, and
Ever since 1980, I've been going to the southern part of the African continent at least once a year. Now, I'd been to Africa 4 times before that, but since 1980, at least once a year. And I'm particularly hooked on the southern part of the continent. In the wilderness of Namibia, in the great sand sea, the highest dunes in the world, there are great sandy red plains and great canyons, and there's a sense of heat, and I have a feeling there that I simply want the soil to just swallow me up. There are mountains there that are pre-Cambrian granite that are so weathered they're literally collapsing into great gigantic piles of rocks. Last year I flew over the Great Barrier Reef, and the water was this incredible emerald turquoise. And in other places it was almost silver, and then the brown or the white reef coming through it. And not many photographs of mine have been published that show real disregard for environments, because quite simply the news ecologically is so bad that people are almost at the point where they can't cope with any more bad environmental news. And so the approach that I tend to take is, look, here's what we have. Here's what's good and sound and beautiful, not necessarily healthy, but this we can save.
Whew. These smell wonderful too. They're called hay-scented ferns. When you crush them, they smell like new-mown hay. They grow wild. I never plant them. I have them all around my house, but I never plant them. They just come, and I save them. I think that's the end of the film.
We're
I'll hear from you then.
I'll be in touch soon. I'll call and
Yeah, okay,
this week
Kit.
sometime.
Very good.
All right,
Nice.
bye-bye.
It was great having you down.